Hello, everyone, and most welcome to 2005 of the
5.
series.
And I associate 2005 with the year 2005. And in this year, yes, 2005. And we associate these lecture numbers with years. And 2005, little architect Renzo Piano finished this center, Paul Klee Center. And you see it actually has spiral forms
Wow.
in Switzerland. And so Renzo Piano has a feeling for spirals.
Beautiful.
So go to Bern and see this spirally work in honor of Paul Klee. So back to the paper and the word is
Yeah,
yours.
Bern is the only place in Switzerland that I visit. So, yeah, nice town. We will continue with Iain McGilchrist, The Matter with Things, and we are at chapter 23 Flow and Movement. Flow and Movement. Bra. We mentioned last time that concept thinking is very close to matter reductionism. If you conceptualize something, you make it to a thing. Things are non-permanent. They will not last. And we earlier spoke about conceptualization of God. I think it was Michelle Fletcher, I'm not 100% sure, but conceptualizing God yourself will make them non-permanent, mean that they will not last. So it is only the river with its contradictions that can have permanence and direction, that is free will. Most people today are not able to have free will nor continuous consciousness. We have become more and more simple automatas. We automatically do things. The urge is before the thinking procedure even can enter into the equation. And we see with the case with Jason Paget, who had a blow to his head in the year 2002, and he turned into a conceptualist. He could be a Bible interpreter as well. He no longer could see wholeness. And he also developed at the same time OCD and PTSD. He became stern-faced. You can see his lecture if you want to get a feel for it. Everything became tangentialized, squares, corners, polygons, roundness were no longer a possibility. He went into the left hemisphere. There was a nice quote here from Bergson, says, by seizing reality, as he put it, from within by intuition and not by simple analysis. Analysis means taking something apart from its context. It was this that drew McGilchrist to the idea of the left right hemisphere difference when he himself was exposed to analysis of a text. It was a poem that was cut apart to, so to speak, extract the meaning or the joy of it. Something that can also be seen in Dead Poets Society. Not far from what Jason Paget was doing after his blow. Another important thing, there is no self in the left hemisphere. And this has a nice connection. There is no body in the left hemisphere. The body is like the Newtonian statue by, I forgot his name, but with nuts and bolts inspired by William Blake, almost like a machine. Yeah, there we have it. They do not realize that the body is a whole. It moves like a whole. It goes like a whole. The spiral direction is one unitary, although they go in different directions. Those different directions signify no contradiction whatsoever. They're actually necessary. So where people try to avoid contradictions, they will lose permanence. They will lose persistence. They would lose what makes a person soulful, having a free will, and the possibility for eternity. That would be blocked effectively. The prioritization of things and concept in modern day is because we are locked into the left hemisphere mode. Once we're there, everything will be sort of reinforced by criticism, which is one of the devilish things that leads to left hemisphere dominance. It's actually here. Criticism of an intuitive philosophy is so easy and so certain to be well received that it will always tempt the beginner. We are tempted to criticism. In our series, we try to avoid criticism, pointing out faults and similar. It's better to look beyond, spiral upwards. Hello, Miria, welcome.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
Thanks, fine. Hope you're all fine there.
We are, thank you. Well, I am.
Regret may come later.
Yeah. I say modern academia is possessed by criticism, negativity, and argumentation, something pointed out by Edward de Bono. It doesn't lead to anything. It stops thinking process. Thinking forward asymmetrically is of the right hemisphere, also connected to humor and laughter and joy. The joylessness is always stemming from the left hemisphere. Regret may come later, and I will continue on page 956. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on the 5th paragraph. The simple act of putting events into language can have a fixative effect. But dealing in names, thing words, changes further our perception of reality. Of reality. Of reality. Join the chorus of reality.
Reality. Reality.
Reality. Although nouns are not always object words and may denote action, there is no doubt that some of the vitality is sucked out of language when we take the substitution of nouns for verbs too far. Too far.
Too
far.
Too far. Contemporary Western language, in keeping with the left hemisphere bias of the culture, tends to nominalize verbs. Nominalize.
Nominalize. Nominalize.
Nominalize. When we talk about an event, writes the philosopher Peter Simmons, we typically nominalize a verb and form a derivative noun or noun phrase. John's snoring last night. Luciano's rendering of Nessun Dorma in Madison Square Garden in 1987. Vesuvius eruption in 79. All designate occurrence, events. We are extremely adept at coining and using such normalization in both impromptu and routine ways. In routine ways. And we all recognize the tendency for bureaucratic and scientific prose to exploit nouns, especially abstract nouns, in place of verbs of verbs, of verbs. In informal speech, we have now become so fond of nouns that we reach for them in an unattractive trend in place of verbs to action something, to inbox something, to architect a plan, to dialogue, and so on, giving rise to the witticism that verbing weirds language.
Verbing weirds language.
Verbing weirds language. Chinese relies more on verb forms than does English. In a language such as Navajo, nouns are not necessary to a sentence, and most information is expressed in verb forms. Verb forms. Verb forms. Verb forms. That both conceptual thought and language return us to the vision of reality as made up of bits and thing words, then instantiate it, helps explain the one-sidedness of much Western philosophy and its historical lack of cogent defenses of a right hemisphere understanding of the world. Which, for all reasons we have already discussed, hold to be truer to what is. It is not possible for the syntax and the grammatical form of language to be changed, mused David Bohm, so as to give a basic rule to the verb rather than to the noun, to the noun, noun or ever. David Bohm, holographic paradigm. Necessary resistance. Yet for all this, conceptual thinking is part of the evolution of self-conscious awareness. Self-conscious awareness. While it is certainly and importantly true, as James says, that when you have broken the reality into concepts, you can never reconstruct it in its wholeness. Fortunately, we do not have to, unless, of course, we fall under the spell of language and abstract concepts to such an extent that we are no longer able to experience the intuitive wholeness from which, as secondary products, those concepts and the things they denote derive. 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 What a big word. Derive. That is a very substantial caveat in the world in which we now live. In some kinds of philosophical tradition, this an inability any longer to experience the intuitive wholeness is exactly what happens. And it so often happens nowadays that we need to be constantly alert to its effect. Skeptical of it and on guard against its capacity to distort.
Skeptical. Skeptical.
Distort.
Distort.
Distort. Let's hear the Eddie Murphy. The conceptual style of thought, James says, is simply superimposed for practical ends only. In order to let us jump about over life instead of wading through it. And if it cannot even pretend to reveal anything of what life's inner nature is or ought to be, we can turn a deaf ear to its accusations deaf ear to his accusations.
Deaf, yeah.
Detoned, no more tones. Anti-Diridian. We are so subject to the philosophical tradition which treats logos or discursive thought generally as the sole avenue to truth, that to fall back on raw, unverbalized life as more of a revealer, and to think of concepts as the merely practical things which Bergson calls them, comes very hard. Very hard. Very hard.
Hard, hard.
James mentioned a Hegelian other, and the thought takes us back to the need for something other than pure continuity and unity. So there must be otherness too, in some form within the flow.
Flow.
So it is that the very first passage I quoted from James above, the one about there being no clean cuts, begins without being one throughout. Such a universe is continuous. Continues. That is the important point. The important point. Its members interdigitate with the next neighbors. So note, there are still members. According to this account, even if they interdigitate. Even if they interdigitate. The universe is continuous. James rides the twin steeds of unity and multiplicity at once. And so do we all. It was James's life work to enable us to see this more clearly, more beautiful than Hegel or any philosopher had ever done or has done since.
Hallelujah, James.
Hallelujah, James. In one of his essays, D.H. Lawrence reflected, 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 reflected. What is it that man sees when he looks at a horse?
Iha, iha,
Yeehaw, yeehaw.
iha.
What is it that will never be put into words? For a man who sees not as a camera does when it takes a snapshot, not even a cinema camera, taking its succession of instantaneous snaps, but in a curious rolling flood of vision in which the image itself seethes and rolls.
Rolls.
And only the mind picks out certain factors which shall represent the image seen. Indeed, indeed. Listen out. D.H. Lawrence. How true. Lawrence describes here perfectly the contrast between the seamless presence of experiential flow to the right hemisphere and its representation in the left hemisphere. An inanimating, I like that word, inanimating takeover of the right hemisphere's animacy. Yet this left hemisphere intervention is not wholly misplaced. Indeed, it plays a crucial role in a certain kind of approach to reality, if only by providing resistance. For while there may well be a stream of consciousness, one aspect of consciousness, namely conceptual thought, as James realized, is not part of that flow. Was that Eddie Murphy? What he may have overlooked is that to continue the metaphor, it provides rocks and stones in the stream. Resistance to flow. Resistance to flow. That is its distinctive property. Its distinctive property. And for anything to arise, rise up, the spiraling up, tend, grow, change, there needs to be a degree of architective resistance within the connective flow. The need for contradictions. In this, the right hemisphere and left hemisphere are, as ever, complementary. Complementary! Oh! Come in, echoes. We have Niels Bohr here. Niels Bohr!
Niels Bohr.
Hallelujah!
Let's resurrect Niels Bohr.
Let's resurrect him. It's time. Finally. In this, the right hemisphere and left hemisphere are, as ever, complementary. The sentence is so grand. Sorry. Complementary. Complementary. He also liked beer, Niels Bohr, and he was supported by Carlsberg. Beer is good.
Bleh.
Wow.
Korsberg. Bleh.
Not so happy with Carlsberg.
Pina colada, yummy yummy.
And this architective resistance, causing something to endure for a while, manifests in mind as conceptual thought, much as I shall later argue, it manifests in space as matter. continuity and discontinuity together. Together, together, together for all. Da dee da da dee da 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 da. We need then continuity and discontinuity together to ride the twin steeds. Here, I would like once more to turn to Schelling. And his image of a stream, which is even more subtle and imaginative than the streams imagined by James or Bergson. Oh dear, Bergson!
Oh, I
Henri-
like Bergson.
Henri Bergson, très bien, Monsieur Bergson. Think of a stream which is itself pure identity. Where it meets resistance, it forms an eddy. This eddy has no permanence, but is constantly disappearing and reappearing. Originally, nothing in nature is differentiated. All that she produces is at that point unseen and dissolved in the general productive potential. The general productive potential. Only when there are points of resistance are nature's products gradually precipitated out, emerging from the general identity. At every point, at every such point, the flow is broken up. So, so that productivity is destroyed. But at each moment, the swell renews and fills the sphere afresh.
Afresh.
Afresh. Afresh. Resistance, according to Schelling, is not a separate force, but comes from the flow itself. From the flow itself. And enables the unfolding of what in it is always potentially there. It precipitates the collapsing of its own potential into the actual. The actual.
The actual.
He is very very clear that this resistance is part of the very same creative force, that the resistance is there to resist. This is like the coincidentia oppositorum, some elements of otherness is incorporated within the force as well. All creation, he urges, is the result of this coincidence. A stream flows in a straight line forward as long as it encounters no resistance. No resistance. Where there is resistance, a whirlpool forms. Every original product of nature is such a whirlpool, every organism. The whirlpool is not something immobilized. It is rather something constantly transforming, but reproduced anew at each moment. Thus, no product in nature is fixed, but it is reproduced at each instant through the force of nature entire. Nature entire. All of it. The holographic paradigm. All of it. The holophrase of David McNeil. All of it. Nature as a whole cooperates in every product. Every product has coincidentia oppositorum. And I think this is a good stopping point for 2005.
The last word being every product.
Every product. Every product. What a great text.
I'm 59. Every product. Every product. I'm 59. Every product.
Let's go to page 956. The last paragraph there, and especially in Sweden, that was even worse than in any other country. We had even a special language that evolved from making verbs into nouns. It was called kanslisvenska, bureaucracy Swedish, and 50 to 60% of it was not even Swedish. It was from Low German, and it was, I remember, almost impossible to understand, but it was tough read. Making nouns affects our thinking. if you remember Joe Dispenza, sorry, he spoke about B waves and gamma waves and delta waves. If we have a thinking that is much, a thinking and talking that is nominalizations, we become less delta and gamma and go into the more symmetric beta. In beta, there is less thinking capacity, less understanding. It also administers stress hormones in the body. We know it's causative of depression and mental diseases as well, like OCD that the poor guy Jason Paget was suffering from. So it has enormous effect, nominalization, or making everything into nouns. 957, if you may, Kalle. The second paragraph. Two lines down. While it is certainly and importantly true, as James says, that when you have broken the reality into concepts, you can never reconstruct it in its wholeness. Once broken, if you take a poem away or apart or dissolve it, the power of the poem can never be regained. That goes for all analyzing of texts. You remove the understanding. It's all top to bottom. Once you have the wholeness, then you can do the small parts. But if you take them apart, then you will lose both the wholeness and the small parts. So it's the whole first, the whole thing, that later goes down to the small. And maybe there is not even a size difference between the small and the big. Just like in fractality. Fractality is also pointing to that. We remember the iteration of the fern. Go to 958. At the end of the quote from D.H. Lawrence, it's a pointer, and only the mind picks out certain factors which shall represent the image seen. Of course, and we've taken up this many times before, we are not cameras. There's not a reality to be like snapshots. Especially with the mobiles today, maybe that is reinforced. No, it doesn't work that way, but it does work that way for the left hemisphere. It doesn't see a reality as continuous, as a wholeness. For a schizophrenic, everything is in parts. He does actually believe the world are separable moments, like in a film, where each photo is distanced by a black barrier. The resistance to flow is made by the material matter. And if you go to the third paragraph, one could say actually that the left hemisphere provides the rocks and the stones. If the left hemisphere is managed by the right hemisphere, it comes in second. And this is very equal to the Wheeler-de Wit equation, where time and space come after the event. Then the left hemisphere will make the material. It's the maker of the impermanence. The impermanence has its chore to provide resistance. Resistance helps the flow in the stream, so nicely depicted by Schelling and D.H. Lawrence and Bergson. The stream has its whirlpool. They are permanent. The river is not permanent, one could say, in a sense that it becomes only permanent together with the stones. The stones together with the water, then you have whirlpools, then you have eternal flow. The resistance is important. So you could call the left hemisphere the matter maker, the matter in its simplest form, stable, steady, point-like, disjunct, maker of impermanence. Representations are not permanent, but still they have their place secondarily, of course. This is not the case today. Today we are ruled by the emissary, not the emperor. And to make a pun on that, a bit skewed, I remember Joe Dispenza said, when you are in the beta level, the non-thinking level, the repetitive, everything is repetition. There is no humor, no laughter, no smiling. The unsmiling is the biggest sign of the left hemisphere. It can be broken by laughter, and also the seriousness can be broken. So think about the H.C. Andersen tale. When you start laughing at the seriousness of the left hemisphere, like the emperor's new clothes, it will dissolve. It will become wholesome again. Only laughter can make that. The little child with his innocence. And do remember, when we were still in the right hemisphere, we laughed a lot. There was a lot of humor naturally coming in. Then we grow stagnant going into the left hemisphere. Everything becomes analyzing, taking apart, cutting apart, making ourselves into zombies or Frankenstein's monsters. So there is an absolute need for the oppositions. It makes not a separate force, as you can see on page 959. The otherness is incorporated within the force itself. Resistance is not a separate force, but comes from the flow itself and enables the unfolding of what in it's always potentially there. It precipitates the collapsing of its own potential into the actual. And going a bit further, the otherness is incorporated with the force itself. As we see in the galaxy, it's all made up of opposing forces and differences. And still it's one, the only stable, enormous thing in the universe. It is just amazing. So permanence was always an option, but it's we that materialize everything, making God into a concept that makes him into a proposition, and he becomes impermanent, non-guiding, non-powerful, and we make ourselves into these mechanical structures, the Newtonian machines we looked at in the beginning. And we can't move anymore, and we stop smiling. We become serious, machine-like. The right hemisphere is to the position that everything coincides of the oppositions. Come in, Kalle, Mirja. You're welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Let me go to bomb. The bomb quotation was on 957.
So as you know, David Bohm, he tried to create an artificial language. He went even to meet native Indians to create a language without nouns. Another tendency of this desire of creating a language is Esperanto. Esperanto is a kind of ideal language. Esperanto. So Esperanto is the world's most widely spoken constructed international auxiliary language, created by the Warsaw-based blah blah blah. So it's in my view, it's a kind of creation of the left side of the brain. Why so? Like, although Bohm was he was working with the right side of the brain in a very high degree. But I think that his desire to create an artificial language was actually misdirected. Why so? For two reasons. One, and I think also McGilchrist shares this view that language is something faulty. So both McGilchrist and Bohm have a suspicion against language. And it's Wittgenstein would perhaps say you try to create a new language, you put it inside a box. A language without tradition, without context, is the construct of the left side of the brain. Do you think, Hans?
Yeah. You know Wittgenstein's opinion of Esperanto.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that McGilchrist actually goes too far, and so let me emphasize. So the thing that you can actually create an ideal language, that language is somewhat fault in itself is problematic. And how should you do instead? I think we can go. Let me see. Let me open. It disappeared. Here. Derrida shows the way. He's playful. There is actually a way to reach the right side of the brain to be playful. And one of his playful a trait of his playfulness is the creation of neologisms. And we saw an example of this today in the previous lecture about this paper by Proy. Let me show you the example. About Searle, the neologism based on Searle.
Okay.
So Searle, he created a neologism Searle, société à responsabilité limitée.
Yeah.
So actually Derrida kills here two birds with one stone. So one is that he he's playful. He reaches the right side of the brain.
Very playful, and in all the debates with Searle, he was being more joyous. He was smiling, and there was laughter from the auditorium. And John Searle only initially was very playful, and then he lost it. Sorry.
And then, okay, he also Derrida shows that he's suspicious of the language, but he shows he doesn't go and criticize it like Bohm or McGilchrist does. So I think Bohm and McGilchrist would do well to imitate Derrida. It's very difficult, of course, create neurologists, but you can have a playful attitude.
Oh yeah. I really like that.
So let me. Page 958, so it's next page. The quotation. Let me turn around, whirling this page, whirling the page. Down here.
Yeah, whirl the page, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a quotation. Who is the quotation is from? I think Schelling. Was it? Yes.
Schelling, yes. It's Schelling.
Schelling, thank you. Yes. So he says here that original nothing nature is differentiated. I would disagree, because everything in nature is actually differentiated. You have it in fractals and Derrida's difference. There's always small differences. That is small differences that make the whole unity.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we know that. Yeah.
And we can think also about the neurologist wholeness or whole. You put the W within parentheses. So you need the wholes, so the differences to have the correctness. So here, I don't know if you agree with me. Original nothing.
No, let's not criticize. It's just he wrote it 200 years ago. He probably meant something different.
Yes.
Sorry for the pun.
And the Schelling quotation on this other page is great.
Sorry for the pun. It was a pretty bad pun, but
resistance, according to Schelling, is not a separate force, but becomes from the flow itself. This is really a great quotation, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Now I jumped too much. What happened here? 959. 959, I think, yes. And this also Schelling. A stream flows in a straight line forward as long as it encounters no resistance. But there is resistance. Whirlpool forms. Every rational product of nature is as a whirlpool. Every organism.
Yeah, very good.
So Mirja, if you want to say something, please.
No, only to thank you.
And we could perhaps end with this image. We chose this image because by architect Renzo Piano, because it's from 2005, and our lecture is number 2005. It shows whirls. You see the whirly.
Oh, lovely. Very nice. Thank you for your comments, all of you, and thank you for the nice depiction here. I really like it. Wow, that is spiraling. Thank you everyone for joining in. Have a very nice morning, day, or afternoon. Bye for now.